Well, shalomi homies, how are you today? Mighty remnant of Most High? You living courageously? You getting your fight on out there? You finding ways to tear into the heart of the kingdom of darkness? Take captivity captive? Come on. Come on. I hope you got some fire in your bellies. If not, you know what? You might need a glass of living water. Just saying. Should have living waters flowing out of your very belly. Chelsea and I are about to release a video that's been many months and years in the making about the living waters. I'm so excited. It should be dropping out here. If you're watching this now, you've probably already seen it. If not, you have to watch it. It's amazing. It's so exciting because we got to hang out together, her and I, and film a video, and it was thrilling. It was thrilling. We were both in rare form, pretty sleep exhausted and deprived. But that's all good. Anyways, today we're back for another episode of the War of the Ages. We're going to go into those principality wars, giving room to the devil. Don't be letting that dragon rent space inside the confines of your heart, your soul, your body, and your will, your emotions. I had a great day just reading a prolific amount of the scriptures yesterday. I don't know. I got an opportunity to just sit and read, not uninterrupted. It's not a reality of my life almost ever. But any of you parents know this. You're like, yeah, I sat down and I read for a minute. And then somebody was like, I have a list of like sentences I hear shouted out. I'm starting to write down all the ridiculous phrases that come out of my mouth or Chelsea's or my daughter's mouth because we have 4 children now. And it's very theatrical around here. And like, like things that I hear, like I'm back here in this little room. And just yesterday, I was sitting here and I'm like reading Acts, and I'm like, I'm going to read through the entire book of Acts. I haven't read through the entire book of Acts in a few months, and I was like, I want to read through the entire book of Acts, and then I'm just hearing these things through the wall. It's very distracting. So then I go outside, and I'm like, I'm going to sit outside, and I can still hear it because there's a window open, and it's just ridiculous, like Naomi screams out, and she's like, "Are you eating a Band-Aid, Abraham? Is that a Band-Aid? That's so gross." It's just like, oh yeah, Abraham's just like, my son is just on the prowl, right? He's not a toddler yet, but he crawls at a very fast pace, and he likes to snort as he gets going, and he gets like some momentum under him, and he will find everything. He just follows the trail of breadcrumbs that fall out of him after we feed him in the high chair, and he like falls down, and then it just like rains down behind him like a tiny trail, and then he'll, over the course of time, turn around and just progressively eat all of those little crumbly bits. Yeah. Anyways, I'm a little distracted by that right now because that's my life. So if I'm moderately enthused, it's because I've got a moment here to hang out, but I can still hear everything that's happening on the other side of these walls. And you know what? It's good sounds. And I'm starting to just embrace it and realize, you know what? This is the life that we are in, and it's a very full life. It's a very vibrant life. But you know what? I found something in the book of Acts yesterday that I just got super stoked about because, these things are obviously on my mind here. Special kill teams. You want to talk about people taking oaths, binding themselves by oath to murder somebody? Like, I'm not going to eat or sleep until we kill somebody. It's a serious thing. It's a crazy awesome book. The Book of Acts is fantastic. If you guys haven't read it, it would behoove you to take some time and read it. I would encourage you. Read the Book of Judges, then read the Book of Acts. Like, those two are like yoked bros together. You know what I'm saying? Like, the parallels between those two is just profound. And if you read them together, you realize, like, we can't go through the Book of Acts again. Like, there's this cry and this desire that so many of us have, that we want to see the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. We want to see the set-apart Spirit moving in a powerful way like we see in the Book of Acts. But the heart of a lot of our issues is that we have not gone through the wilderness refining times as a body of believers. Many of us are still clinging to the bondages of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. We're carrying along with us a lot of the baggage that was sown into us seditiously from the days of our youth, that's kept us from being able to enter in to the same type of walk, the same type of anointing, the same type of ministry and movement of Yah's Spirit as these people had at that time, because they also went through great trials. They went through a lot of suffering and affliction, and during those seasons, they pressed into him. During those seasons, the old man and the old women got to be squeezed out of them. Like, let's go to Ephesians 4 first. I know I read the Bible in all kinds of different ways. And sometimes as I'm reading along, I hear a sentence like the way of peace in Luke, in the first chapter of Luke, like the way of peace, when Zechariah is prophesying about his son and he talks about the way of peace. And I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. And my mind starts jumping to every other place where I can think of, where have I heard the way of peace? And I think of the gospels of the sandals of peace that are like supposed to be upon us, that our feet are fitted with the gospels of peace. And I'm like, yeah, you'd be going on your way, the way of peace. And I'm like, but there's somewhere where there's like a counterforce to that, and like you jump over and you're like, oh, the book of Romans. Let's jump over to Romans real quick. you know and some of you are like this when you read the Bible, and if you've read it a lot, it starts to happen more and more because you realize there's these interconnectedness. But somebody that was well read in the scriptures, the scriptures often, like somebody that's writing it in modernity towards the New Testament times, they were very, very well versed in the Tanakh, right? The Torah, the writings, prophets. They were really well read in that. And so when they would make these phrases, right, they're thinking of Isaiah, they're thinking of Jeremiah, they're thinking of these other times where they've heard that phrase, like the way of peace. And so when they're using it later on, they also are writing to people who have a contextual understanding of the concept that they're throwing out there. And so a lot of times as you're reading, and especially in the New Testament a lot of times is like a Cliff Notes version of the Old Testament. And it's its own way of writing, especially with Paul. Paul is incredibly well read. Paul is very much more like a scholar. So he writes at a very high level at a very rapid pace. And so sometimes as you're reading through Paul, he shoots out so much information that it's hard to digest it all, especially if you lack the foundations of those early years of study when it comes to the scriptures. And most of us, unfortunately, have been raised in a society that dispensationalized the scriptures. They took the scriptures and they ripped out chunks of it and said, this section is for this people at this time. This section doesn't apply to you. They may not always as explicitly have said that to you, but that's really what the heart of the doctrine that is taught in the vast majority of theological seminaries. And because of that, that's what most pastors teach. And most of those pastors then pass that on. And that's what gets multiplied out to people, is that these kind of words of the Old Testament don't really matter apart from children's stories, right? And so but by doing that, we've been disinherited from like any concept of a Hebraic mindset that would lend so much perspective to us to help us to grasp a hold of these words, like they're talking about in book of Romans, or like they're talking about in the book of Ephesians. And if we can kind of grow up with the right foundations, if we can deepen our roots first and foremost in the Old Testament, as well as we study our way through the New, it enriches the entirety of the thing. I got a letter from a lady who said she was an incredibly young lady who is now in her seventh decade of life, but she's young in heart and vivacious with the word. She's working through reading the scriptures for her 23rd time from Genesis to Revelation. That's amazing. I was so humbled when I read that, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much to learn. Like, I have so much to learn. I realized at the end of the day, like, there is something waiting for us on the second time we've read it from Genesis to Revelation that we could never have found the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. Like, this book is so alive, and it has such a depth of riches and complexities to it that every time you come to it as a different person. And it's just the same way. You can never step into the same river twice. It's always going to be different every single time you step into it. The scriptures is like that because you're going to step into it at the course of your life where you've moved. You have moved mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You've developed, you've matured, you've changed. Like, Abraham will literally never be the same tomorrow as he is today. I will never get to see him be like that as he was, like that snorting, crawling thing, right? He is right now, right? That's going to disappear, and it will be only a distant memory. It will never be there for me to see or witness or experience again, apart from these echoes of it through the forms of entertaining videos or whatever that I might preserve. But otherwise, like, all I can do is store that up in my heart. But the scriptures, people took the time, inspired by the Ruach HaKodesh, to write and diligently share their testimonies, their witnesses. And as we would regard and understand the powerful impacts of what our life is like, we could take the time to start writing out our testimonies, writing out our witnesses, writing out the journals, the experiences of what it is that's happening in our life, what it is the Father's speaking to us about. How are we growing and maturing? What are the new revelations that we found today? Like, for me, that's what a lot of this vlogging is that I do with you guys. Like, these are the discoveries that I find, and I want to share them with others. Like, I'm a passionate person. Like, when I find treasure, I love to share it. That's like what I was made to do. My name is Nathan. It means giver. That's like the preeminent position that I'm in. I like to give what I find away. To me, that's the greatest joy and the greatest satisfaction I find in my life is to give treasure to those because I love the hunt. I'm all about the hunting. The hunting is the fun part for me, right? And once I found it, right, I love it, and then I'm excited about it. I want to pass it on to others, right? Because I want to see that excitement grow. I want to see it be multiplied. But this end is in Romans chapter 3. I should read it to you from Luke first. Let's see if we get there. Thankfully, I have an unlimited amount of time to potentially. It can always get crazy loud across this wall. And then we're jumping back into it. Let's just go to Luke 1. Luke 1 is one of my favorite chapters in the entire scriptures. Oh my gosh, it's so good, especially in this section about the prophecy. Maybe I'll just read to you guys the entirety of Luke chapter 1 first. It's just so full of incredible showdown and miracles, and we get to see some immortals popping in here and doing some mighty works and wonders. This is fun. Let's do it. Let's have fun. Let's go on a journey. Luke chapter 1. For those of you guys that ever want to read, I'll try to start including at the very end of this in the descriptions below. You guys, there's a pop-down window that's got all kinds of links and hyperlinks in there, like for my audiobook, my ebook, free for download. I also have an audio recording of the entirety of the scriptures. So if you guys ever want to just listen to the scriptures and not a dude talking about the scriptures, you are more than welcome to. And I'll try to include the books of the things that we read here today, so you can hear the entire context of everything I'm talking about, because it's more rich of a story if you tell the whole story instead of just a snippet theology, right? Instead of telling everyone like, no, this is what this verse means. I'm like, we should read the whole chapter. Why don't we read the whole book? Why don't we read the whole Torah? Why don't we read the whole entire New Testament to like get a firm, rich grasping of it? Check this out. Luke chapter 1. Since many have indeed taken in hand to set in order an account of the matters completely confirmed among us, as those who, from the beginning, were eyewitnesses and servants of the word delivered them to us, it seemed good to me as well, having followed up all these matters exactly from the beginning, to write to you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, that you might know the certainty of the words which you were taught. There was in the days of Herodes, the sovereign of Yehuda, a certain priest named Zechariah of the division of Abiah, and his wife was of the daughters of Aharon, and her name was Elsheba. And they were both righteous before Elohim, blamelessly walking in all the commands and righteousness of Yahuwah. You see that? It's not a hard thing to walk in the commandments of Yahuwah and the righteousness to him. Here we have an example of somebody who is walking in those commands and guarding those precepts. They were doing righteously. They were living in their lives in accordance with the Torah in a blameless way. Like we read about with Job. He was another man who was put forth as an example to all of us of how to walk out a righteous life. And here we have Zechariah and Elizabeth, or Elsheba, living that out in such a way. So these should be some of those characters that pop up in the story that are like exemplary. We want to look and model our lives like these people. Like when we read about Philip in Acts chapter 7 and 8, in Acts chapter 8, like these are people that we want to look like, right? These are like example characters for us to like greatly change our lives towards. And they had no child because Elisheba was barren, and both were advanced in years. And it came to be that while he was serving as priest before Elohim in the order of his division, according to the institute of the priesthood, he was chosen by Lot to burn incense when he went into the dwelling place of Yahuwah. So there was a prescribed time frame that each and every priest of Yahuwah was selected to go in and serve. They weren't on duty 52 weeks out of the year. They were only on duty for a certain course of time, and then when that course of time was up, they literally went back to their house. They were freed from their duty, and they could go back to their property. And the entire crowd of people was praying outside at the hour of incense. And a messenger of Yahuwah appeared to him, standing on the right side of the slaughter place of incense. And when Zechariah, so now we've got an immortal shows up, righteous immortal of Yahuwah shows up here in the midst of this course of duties. Unusual thing. And when Zechariah saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. One of the most common things that we'll hear anytime there's an encounter with an immortal, anytime there's an encounter with one of these messengers, that this fear comes upon them. Because what you're dealing with is something that's completely other than us. It may have a similar form or fashion to us, but clearly they bring forth in their presence this absolute churning of fear, dread. A lot of times people fall on their faces. People are terrified. People are stunned. They're like incapable of speaking. They're stupefied, right? This is one of those encounters that you're going to have where you literally somebody is talking to an angel, like when the wife and the mother of Samson, right? When she has her encounter with the messenger of Yahuwah, she's completely terrified, shocked, and stupefied. She understands she's talking with like an immortal, but at the same time, she's like, I need to go get my husband. That's a righteous woman. Ladies, if an angel, an immortal shows up to you and you're married, you should get your husband, because trust me, lots of times it's happened where these immortals show up and they canoodle with the ladies instead. Don't do that. Just saying. Cautionary tale. Praise Yah for Samson's mom. She did the right thing. And when Zechariah saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. But the messenger said to him, Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer is heard. And your wife Elsheba shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Yochanan, John. And you shall have joy and gladness, and many shall rejoice at his birth. For he shall be great before Yahuwah, and shall drink no wine and strong drink at all. And he shall be filled with the set apart spirit, even from his mother's womb. Anytime you see that phrase, not drink wine or strong drink, that's the beginning portion of the things that are ascribed to a Nazarite. So something to consider. Similar encounter to what Samson's mom was told, like, don't let him drink wine or strong drink, and neither let a razor come up on his head, for he shall be a Nazarite from the womb, right? Samuel's mom, she made a vow to Yahuwah that she would set him apart as a Nazarite from the womb. This is something that you'll see during courses of like very important vows and very important prophetic like declarations of a child that is going to be brought forth. And he shall turn many of the children of Israel to Yahuwah their Elohim. And he shall go before him in the spirit and power of Eliyahu, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the insight of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for Yahuwah. Come on. Bro, what a prophecy. Like, what a declarative statement about your child being spoken to you. What an amazing moment to be like, first of all, I'm talking to an immortal. I'm talking to an angel. Like, just try to literally put yourself there for a second. Like, giant, shining, beautiful, stunningly powerful being shows up in your door, and you're like, whoa, oh my gosh, on your face. And he speaks to you about this incredible son that you're going to have. Like, what an amazing and awesome and glorious moment to regard. Like, what an awesome reward that's coming to you at this moment. And this has always been the phrase that got me, you guys, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. Now, if you're not read in the scriptures, that's not going to mean a whole lot to you. But these are like the last words of kind of like a remembrance that were prophesied long ago. And this guy, Zechariah, he would have remembered these words. He's, like we talked about, being well read and rooted and grounded in the scriptures. These words would have been profound to him, right? This is from Malachi 4:6. We should read the whole thing first. Chapter 4. For look, the day shall come, burning like a furnace, and all the proud and every wrongdoer shall be stubble. And the day that shall come shall burn them up, said Yahuwah of hosts, which leaves to them neither root nor branch. But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings. And you shall go out and leap for joy like calves from the stall. And you shall trample the wrongdoers, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day that I do this. Remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb, for all Yisrael's laws and right rulings. Here's the prophecy. Ready? See, I am sending you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and awesome day of Yahuwah. And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with utter destruction. So Zechariah is literally hearing, my son is coming in the spirit of Elijah. My son is coming to fulfill those words that Malachi spoke. This is hundreds of years ago. He is literally hearing that his son is going to be the one who carries forth this promised fulfillment of this moment. I mean, unbelievably powerful prophecy to be spoken over his child. But please understand something. The second this prophecy gets spoken in, the second this takes place, Now we're dealing with something that was spoken in a spiritual realm that is being brought down as a messenger of Yahuwah to come and give his word to a man that now has to believe on that word. Because understand something here. Zechariah will never see his son fulfill these words. The enemy, the other immortals here, have seen also what is taking place. They understand, hey, that one that was spoken of, the one that was prophesied, that one who's coming in the spirit of Elijah, the immortal just came down with a message that said Zechariah's son is going to be that one. So everything begins to take place behind the scenes too, where the opposition, the adversaries begin to lay up a storm of destruction against this plan of fulfilling itself. They don't want this to come to take place. They don't want it to come to pass. And so they set themselves up against this. And you know what? Zechariah, as much as he may want to be the father who sees what his son will become, I want to see what Abraham will become. But you know what? I know not what tomorrow will bring. I know not what it'll bring. None of us really know what tomorrow's going to bring. For those of you that have young children, as much as we long to see what they will become and the promises that have been spoken over them, we want to know who they will be and the life they'll choose. It's not a promise for us to be participants in that process. Many of us, if any of us are still with our children, it's still alive, we have such a miraculous opportunity to raise them up in a path of life. But you know what? Our desires, as long as we have them, is to turn our hearts back to them. Yahuwah sends his word out to try to remind us we need to turn our hearts towards our children. And we pray that Yahuwah will help to turn their hearts towards their fathers, because this is the area that the enemy has been targeting to destroy from the beginning, is fathers' love for their children and children's regard for their fathers. This is where the enemy is so insidiously driven a wedge of destruction against fathers and against sons and children, is to destroy those relationships so that children are perceived and we're raised to believe they're these burdens, they're these annoyances, they're these frustrations. And believe me, they can be all of those things. But in the society that we have today, our children are not our co-laborers. We're rarely able to raise them up to be right alongside us, working and doing the jobs that we're doing from a young age early on. Like, it's really rare for us to raise our children in that manner. It's just something we got to try to turn back to and regard. But this is the hard reality of Zechariah's life, is that he is about to face the encounters of doubt and disbelief, and it's going to be costly for him. And Zechariah said to the messenger, "By what shall I know this? For I am old, and my wife advanced in years." And the messenger answering said to him, "I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of Elohim, and was sent to speak to you and announce to you this good news. But see, you shall be silent and unable to speak until the day this takes place, because you did not believe my words, which shall be filled in their appointed time." And the people waited for Zechariah and marveled at his delay in the dwelling place. And when he came out, he was unable to speak to them. And they recognized that he had seen a vision in the dwelling place, for he was beckoning to them and remained dumb. Okay, a couple things here. He can't speak, right? Often understood, right? But he's also literally like dumb. He can't hear. He can't hear either. This is why he's not right. He can't do anything to communicate with him except for writing from this point out. He ties up his lips, man. He's like, you're gonna be dumb. You're not gonna be able to talk. And it came to be as soon as the days of his service. We'll get a little fulfillment of where that comes later on. It says that, sorry for those of you that have never heard that, maybe that he was deaf as well as dumb. Later on, it says that when they're trying to ask him what's the name of his son going to be, it says they had to make signs to him. Like, they're using sign language to talk to him. Something to consider. And it came to be as soon as the days of his service were completed, he went away to his house. And after those days, his wife Elisheba conceived, and she hid herself 5 months, saying, Yahweh has done this for me in the days when he looked upon me, to take away my reproach among men. And in the 6th month, the messenger Gabriel was sent by Elohim to a city of Galil named Nazareth, to a maiden engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David, and the maiden's name was Miriam. And the messenger came to her, said, Greetings, favored one. The master is with you. Blessed are you among women. But she was greatly disturbed at his word and wondered what kind of greeting this was. And the messenger said to her, Do not be afraid, Miriam, for you have found favor with Elohim. And see, you shall conceive in your womb, and shall give birth to a son, and call his name Yeshua. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Most High. And Yahweh Elohim shall give him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Yaakov forever, and there shall be no end to his reign. And Miriam said to the messenger, How shall this be, since I do not know a man? And the messenger answering said to her, The set-apart spirit shall come upon you, and the power of the Most High shall overshadow you. And for that reason, the set-apart one, born of you, shall be called Son of Elohim. And see, Elsheba, your relative, she also has conceived a son in her old age, and this now the 6th month of her who was called barren, because with Elohim no matter shall be impossible. Miriam said, See, the female servant of Yahuwah, let it be to me according to your word. And the messenger went away from her. And Miriam arose in those days and went into the hill country with haste to a city of Yahudah, and entered into the house of Zechariah, and greeted Elsheba. And it came to be, when Elsheba heard the greeting of Miriam, that the baby leaped in her womb. And Elsheba was filled with the set-apart spirit, and called out with a loud voice and said, Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And who am I, that the mother of my master should come to me? For look, when the sound of your greeting came to my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who believed, for that which Yahweh has said to her shall be accomplished. And Miriam said, My being makes Yahweh great, and my spirit has rejoiced in Elohim my Savior, because he looked on the humiliation of his female servant. For look, from now on all generations shall call me blessed. For he who is mighty has done wonders for me, and set apart is his name, and his compassion is from generation to generation to those who fear him. He did mightily with his arm. He scattered the proud in thought of their hearts. He brought down rulers from their thrones and exalted the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good items, and the rich he has sent away empty. He sustained Yisrael his servant in remembrance of his compassion, as he spoke to our fathers, to Abraham, and to his seed forever. Come on. These ladies are fired up. You know what I'm saying? These ladies are pumped up. Think of how honorable these women were and how upright they were before Yahuwah, to have been bestowed upon them to carry forth these prophesied children. What an incredible honor, but also how much they were trusted in order to do so. Like, they are blessed. What a blessed thing that is. Now, Mary here, the one we just read about here, is absolutely honorable and upright and righteous. And understand, there's times when I'm always trying to point out that there is a version of other mighty ones. There's a version of Mary that has been exonerated and placed on a throne as if she herself is part of the Godhead. That there is a massive force that has come behind the scenes that comes from a different mighty one, a different God, who is called the Queen of Heaven, who is called Astarte, who is called Semiramis, Isis, Ishtar, right? She was also called by Venus and venerated by these other ones as Juno. Okay. It's very important for us to understand the worship of the person Mary, the character here that we just read about, was substituted for the worship of the Queen of Heaven, right? This idolatry is something that is a core tenet of pantheism and of the Universal Catholic Church. That doctrinal ideology comes from picking up and venerating these deities of old who had been worshipped as these virgin, the Blessed Virgin, literally is like a title they would give to her, even though she was known to be the one that gave people legal grounds for sexual exploits. They venerated her and called her the Blessed Virgin. Like, one of these, here's a book for those of you that are unfamiliar with this or who want to understand and identify more of it and get a better contextual historical breakdown of where these pagan roots got sewn in and intermixed with Christianity. Like, so much of what the Catholic ideology did was they amalgamated pagan religions, rites, and rituals and practices, and then put things from the scriptures and veneered them over each other. And this is why there's this horrible mixing of pagan ideology that infects the Christian faith, that infects the Catholic faith. But really, the horror of it, the core of it, is this great whoredom that we see coming from there. I'm just going to read from you one of the pages here because um, I was reading a different book back that was on Hernando Cortez and his invasion, the conquistadors and their invasions of them coming into the Americas. I've referenced it before. I'll put a link down in it below. But they, the way that they came over and infiltrated the Americas was to replace them. Like one of the main core tenets of what they wanted to do was to get them to stop sacrificing humans. That's great, right? Because in their temples there, they were all sacrificing, which they were sacrificing to these mighty ones, these immortals that they called Huachiblos, and they would sacrifice people to him, right? And they would do all kinds of cannibalism and all this other stuff. And part of his job was when he was coming over as like the priest was like, well, we're going to get rid of those pagan practices. This is literally like their words. We're going to get rid of these horrible things. You're going to stop doing that. And we're going to venerate for you. We're going to bring to you the Blessed Mary, the Blessed Virgin, the Queen of Heaven. And they would have them set up a cross, and then they would have them set up the woman. They would have them set up the Queen of Heaven there and teach them the rites and rituals to bow down to her. This is the Maryism, right? This is how they came into Central America and South America and Mexico. Like that's why that ideology. Like I grew up going down to Mexico a lot. I grew up in Arizona. The cults that worship Mary are unbelievably thick in Mexico in particular. And it was because literally those guys brought those in. That was the first thing they did. And it's a replacement theology. It's where they come in and they're like, I know you're worshiping your gods this way, but listen, don't do that. Here's how you can worship up instead. And it literally chronicles in here how they would travel around. Catholic missionaries would travel around and be like, wow, it's amazing. We find the Queen of Heaven being worshipped over here in Tibet. Isn't that amazing? And it's like, yeah, because people have been worshiping this false version of a Trinity where there's a Queen of Heaven, the God of Heaven, who's venerated. And then you have Nimrod and, sorry, let me just read it to you from here. Here's just an annotation of some of the times where they come find this person. And a lot of this was rooted in a mixing of the scriptures from the prophecy about who was going to crush the serpent's head. And early on, they changed the scriptures so that the prophecy from Genesis 3, when we talked about the beginning of this great war of the ages, was that he would crush the seed of the woman, would crush the head of the serpent, right? Well, they changed it to say she would crush the head of the serpent. And so that's why you'll see this iconography of Mary standing with a serpent's head being crushed under her feet, right? That's because they literally changed the scriptures to fit that ideology. But that comes from a much older pagan source. And so this is a annotation on page 75 on the chapter is called The Mother of the Child. And page 74. Now the Son, even in his new incarnation, when Nimrod was believed to have reappeared in a fairer form, was exhibited merely as a child, without any very particular attraction, while the mother, in whose arms he was set off with all art of painting and sculpture, as invested with much of that extraordinary beauty in which reality belonged to her. The beauty of Semiramis is said on one occasion to have quelled a rising rebellion among her subjects on her sudden appearance among them. And it is recorded that the memory of the admiration excited in their minds by her appearance on that occasion was perpetuated by a statue erected in Babylon, representing her in the guise in which she fascinated them so much. The Babylonian queen was not merely in character coincident with Aphrodite of Greece and the Venus of Rome, but was in fact the historical original of that goddess that by the ancient world was regarded as the very embodiment of everything attractive in female form and the perfection of female beauty. For Sanchuniathon assures that Aphrodite or Venus was identical to Astarte, and Astarte being interpreted is none other than, quote, the woman that made towers or encompassing walls, end quote. See Semiramis. The Roman Venus is also well known, was the Cyprenian Venus, and Venus of Cyprus is historically believed to have been derived from Babylon. The mother, in point of fact, became the favorite object of worship. To justify this worship, the mother was raised to divinity as well as her son, and she was looked upon as destined to complete that bruising of the serpent's head, which it was easy, if such a thing was needed, to find abundant and plausible reasons for alleging that Ninus, or Nimrod, the great sun, in his mortal life had only begun. The Roman Church maintains that it was not so much the seed of the woman as the woman herself that was to bruise the head of the serpent. In defiance of all grammar, she renders the divine denunciation against the serpent thus, quote, "She shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise her heel," end quote. The same was held by ancient Babylonians and symbolically represented in their temples. In the uppermost story of the Tower of Babel, or Temple of Belus, Diodorus Siculus tells us there stood 3 images of the great divinity of Babylon, and one of these was of a woman grasping a serpent's head. Among the Greeks, the same was symbolized for Diana, whose real character was originally the same as that of the great Babylonian goddess. Now, here, just pause for a second, because this isn't something that's just back then. Oh yeah, the Roman Catholic Church did this, and then all of these Christian churches even still do this stuff. Listen, people still to this day go set up idols in their houses on these different times and seasons, and they set up all these images of these scenes playing out, and they get these traditions from the ancestors of old. People have been doing this forever. Well, nowadays we are living in a time and a season where these immortals, these gods, are being worshipped again. Okay, when you look at the DC comic books and these characters, right? Diana, right? This goddess of warfare, right? Or this goddess that's the savior of the people, right? This is literally like Wonder Woman. You guys, those of you that are familiar with the superheroes kind of world right now, that's why Wonder Woman is being exalted and venerated and brought forth. Even in the early movies, she would like step onto the battlefield and all the men are just like, oh, I'm just not even going to fight anymore. That scene where you're watching this stuff take place is literally what I just read about. This is what this is Babylonian traditions about Semiramis that got changed into these different names. All this goes back to the Tower of Nimrod. It goes back to that war of the immortals. It goes back to the dividing of the nations, to the sons of Elohim. The nation were divided by 70, and an immortal was placed over each and every one of them. Those immortals now have the desire to get mankind to worship them and to do things their way and to remember their traditions, to venerate them, to preserve their legends, their myths. That's the way they keep their story going. That's the way they stay alive and they stay relevant. And so, like today, when you guys go out and you watch these movies and you watch these TV shows, and you watch and hear these things, you're having this stuff wash over your mind. You're being exposed to Babylonian mysticism. You're being exposed to the doctrines, to the influences of these other gods for a reason, because it's very powerful. It's very infectious. It's very insidious. It's very captivating, right? And that's those snares that the adversary is always seeking to sow out there, right? These are those same things that have been permeating our culture every day. If you walk into a normal Christian church, you're going to see idols of all kinds all over the walls. Like people bow down before a cross. Why? Like, why are you bowing down before an image of execution? Like, why are you bowing down before a naked, dead, dying man on a cross and praying to him? That's an image, right? People set these up and they venerate these things. And he's like, this is why at the very beginning of the 10 Commandments, he's like, listen, don't make images, don't make idols, don't bow down to them, don't worship them. And it's easy for us to think, I don't do that. I don't do that. But we do, because we are worship factories. We're worship factories. And if we venerate these things, we place them as idols around our house, even in some people's houses, their children, pictures of their children become their idols. Their house gets permeated, covered wall to wall with pictures of these moments. And they're trying to hold on to these memories of a time that they never want to lose. They never want to forget. They don't want to lose sight of, right? And they're there to draw them back out to this moment, right? But some people, they literally become worshipers of their children. Their whole life becomes consumed by their children, and they cannot separate their identity from that. And you'll see this a lot with empty nesters and people that after that phase of life is changed and it's gone away, that the reminiscing kind of period starts, and then there's a grieving and a mourning and a groaning for that season. But a lot of times it's triggered by all these memories and these pictures on the walls. I'm not trying to just pick apart every single aspect of this, but I'm trying to get you guys to have a better lens with which to examine, hey, have I exalted certain things into my life and placed them as forms of worship, not knowing that I'm picking up and participating in forms of paganism, that I'm bringing over into my ideological pursuits of the Messiah and over guarding his ways, and I'm carrying with me this baggage of Babylon. So many of us have got junk in our trunk from Babylon, and we just don't know where it comes from because we really are ignorant. We've been raised to be dumb so that we cannot understand this stuff. So there's no real deep recognizing of who it is that we're talking about here. Anyways, I'll jump ahead a little bit here. No, we'll just keep going. This is on page 76. As time wore away and the facts of Semiramis's history became obscured, her son's birth was boldly declared to be miraculous. Therefore, she was called Alma Mater, the Virgin Mother. That the birth of the great deliverer was to be miraculous was widely known long before the Christian era. For centuries, some say thousands of years before the event, Buddhist priests had a tradition that a virgin was to bring forth a child to bless the world. That this tradition came from no popish or Christian source is evidence from the surprise felt and exhibited by the Jesuit missionaries, daggum those Jesuits, when they first entered Tibet and China, and not only found a mother and a child worshipped as at home, but that mother worshipped under a character exactly corresponding with that of their own Madonna, Virgo Diapara, the Virgin Mother of God. And that too in regions where they could not find least trace of either the name or history of our Lord Jesus Christ having ever been known. The primeval promise that the seed of the woman should bruise the serpent's head naturally suggested the idea of a miraculous birth. Priestcraft and human presumption set themselves wickedly to anticipate the fulfillment of that promise, and the Babylonian queen seems to have been the first to whom that honor was given. The highest titles were accordingly bestowed upon her. She was called, quote, the Queen of Heaven, end quote, in Jeremiah 49, 17, 18, 19, and 25. In Egypt, she was styled Athor, the habitation of God, to signify that in her dwelt all the fullness of the Godhead, to point out that great goddess mother in a pantheistic sense as at once the infinity and almighty one and the virgin mother. This inscription was engraven upon one of her temples in Egypt, quote, I am all that has been, or that is, or that shall be. No mortal has removed my veil. The fruit which I have brought forth is the Son, end quote. In Greek, she had the name Hestia, and amongst the Roman, Vesta, which is the modification of the same name, a name which, though it has been commonly understood in a different sense, really meant the dwelling place. Even when Vesta is identified with fire, this same character of Vesta as the dwelling place distinctly appears. Hence, at this day, the great goddess in India, as wielding the power of God, whom they represent, are called Sakti, or the tabernacle, right? Now, in her, as the tabernacle or temple of God, not only all power, but all grace and goodness were believed to dwell. Every quality of gentleness and mercy was regarded as centered in her. And when death had closed her career, while she was fabled to have been deified, and changed into a pigeon, to express the celestial benignity of her nature, she was called by the name of Dione, or the dove, without article, or Juno, the name of the Roman called the Queen of Heaven, which is the very same meaning under the form of a dove as well as her own. She was worshipped by the Babylonians. This is why. So he's got some pictures in here to show you what's going on here. So like when you're seeing the iconography of like people with the image of a dove, right? Or the Queen of Heaven, Mary with a dove and an olive branch. It's not talking about Noah. It's not talking about the olive branch that the dove brought back to Noah. This is who they're alluding to here. And this is because the mystery religions, their job is to communicate through esoteric signs and symbols, through signs and symbols that on one side have magical meanings and mysteries behind them, that for those that are initiated into the secret religions, into the old religions, they have a hidden knowledge, right? They've eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So they know what it really means. But to the masses out there, they don't. So to them, they're blinded, but to us, we are illumined. That's how all of these rites and rituals practices carry on. If you brought somebody from Babylonia and put them in a Catholic church, they are going to see the signs and symbols that are communicating to them the story of their gods played out before them. Same thing for a lot of Christian churches where they have their own signs and symbols that have been carried over from these other mystery religions to communicate these messages. And that's because we've been beguiled for so long that we won't pick it up and regard our history to understand what these things come from and why they're so dangerous. Like Jeremiah was put forth as a prophet in the days in Judea. He's preaching to the people, warning them, you guys have got to stop doing this stuff. You've got to flee this stuff, because this same great whore that's talked about in Revelation, this is who we're talking. I'm trying to identify it to you guys. The great whore. Understand, please. Like the city of Rome is where the birth is, the womb, where the incubation chamber, where all these mystery religions have been propagated across the world. It's the city that John is talking about here. It's not they're not going to rebuild some desert abandoned waste place in Iraq and they're going to make Babylon great. It's not it, you guys. He's using a way of communicating in secret about the city of Rome. He understood that is the seat, the city of seven hills. That's it. That's where all of these permeations of idolatry and paganism have been flowing from, through this veneer of the Catholic Church, where they picked and took pieces out of the truth in order to make the poison more effective and digestible for the masses to consume. That's why that warnings are so inscribed in the scriptures for us. This is nothing new for the prophets to be trying to warn the people against this form of idolatry. This is on page 81. Tacitus gives evidence that the Babylonian goddess was worshipped in the heart of Germany, and Caesar, when he invaded Britain, found that the priests of the same goddess, known by the name of Druids, had been there before him. Herodotus, from personal knowledge, testifies that in Egypt, this, quote, queen of heaven, end quote, was, quote, the greatest and most worshipped of all divinities, end quote. Wherever her worship was introduced, it is amazing what fascinating power it exerted. Truly, the nations might be said to have been made drunk with the wine of her fornications. So deeply, in particular, did the Jews in the days of Jeremiah drink of her wine cup. So bewitched were they with her idolatrous worship that even after Jerusalem had been burnt and the land desolated for this very thing, they could not be prevailed upon to give it up. While dwelling in Egypt as forlorn exiles, instead of being witnesses for God against the heathenism around them, they were as much devoted to this form of idolatry as the Egyptians themselves. Jeremiah was sent of God to denounce wrath against them if they continued to worship the Queen of Heaven, but his warnings were in vain. This is going to be from Jeremiah 49, verses 15 through 17. Then said the prophet, all the men which knew that their wives had burnt incense unto other gods, and all the women that stood by, a great multitude, even all the people that dwelt in the land of Egypt, in Pathros, answered Jeremiah, saying, as for the word that you have spoken unto us in the name of Yahuwah, we will not hearken unto you, but we will certainly do whatsoever things goes forth out of our own mouths, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings and our princes, in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then we had plenty of victuals, and were well, and we saw no evil. Thus did the Jews, God's own peculiar people, emulate the Egyptians in their devotion to the Queen of Heaven. The worship of the goddess mother with the child in her arms continued to be observed in Egypt till Christianity entered in. If the gospel had come in power among the mass of the people, the worship of this goddess queen would have been overthrown. With the generality, it only came in name. Instead, therefore, thereof, the Babylonian goddess being cast out, in too many cases, her name was only changed. She was called then the Virgin Mary, and with her child was worshipped with the same idolatrous feelings by professing Christians as formerly by open and avowed pagans. Oh. The consequence was that when in AD 325 the Nicene Council was summoned to condemn the heresy of Arius, who denied the true divinity of Christ, that heresy indeed was condemned, but not without the help of men who gave distinct indications of a desire to put the creature on a level with the Creator, to set the Virgin Mother side by side with her Son. At the Council of Nicaea, says the author of Nimrod, quote the Melechite section, that is, the representative of the so-called Christianity of Egypt, held that there were three persons in the Trinity, the Father, the Virgin Mary, and the Messiah, their Son. In reference to this astounding fact, elicited by the Nicene Council, Father Newman speaks exultingly of these discussions as tending to the glorification of Mary. He goes on for a good long while here, but you guys get the point. This veneration of the mighty ones of a region, instead of the expulsion of them, instead of the eradication of them, allows them to prosper, and it continues to pollute the body of Messiah every single day. This is why, like First John, we talk about the super weapon of First John. His warning is always about little children. The last words he writes in that book: keep yourself from idols. Because at the end of the day, it's still a war of the immortals. It's still a war with the idols. Now you guys get an idea why you got to be on guard about these things, because they're working hard. They're working hard day and night. They don't sleep. We got to labor harder. We got to be those diligent workers who come out of the closets of cowardice and become bold and courageous for the kingdom truths that we have come to know and believe. We got to be more bold and courageous than they are. They're very transparent about what they do and what they're all about. They put it out there for everyone. They spend lots of money. They invest tremendous resources to advancing their kingdoms. Like how might we do likewise? How might we find ways to be investing so diligently our resources to advance the kingdom of Yahuwah in every area that we can? We must use every bit of talent and resources that we have to try to advance the kingdom of Yahuwah, to expose the people to the truth so that they might have something to hold on to. Because you know what? These religions are doctrines of death. At the end of the day, they don't give people the true hope that they need. They give them symptom management. It's another form of sorcery. It's like treating people's symptom of pain and not dealing with the root cause of it, instead of adjusting their spine and bringing their body back into alignment, right? You just give them something to make their pain go away temporarily, so they have to come back and get more. That's the version of religion that most people have been fed from their youth, not understanding that that's a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, right? That's drinking from the cup of demons and not understanding why you're still thirsty and hungry. Yeshua said to him, come to me, all who are thirsty, and I will give you drink, right? He said the woman of the well in John 4, he's like, listen, if you had asked of me for water, living waters, I would have given you a cup of living waters that you would never thirst again. He would have given her water so she never thirsted again. That's only from purity. That can never come from pollution. When we drink of pollution, we're going to thirst again. We're going to suffer from it. Let's carry on back in Luke. Oh, and she said in there, Mary said that just beautiful phrase. She said, he brought down rulers from their thrones and exalted the lowly. Come on. Dang right he did. Hallelujah. That's the power story right there. That's the power encounters. Like he talks about in the book of Hebrews. You know, you're like, dang, they're bringing down kingdoms, y'all. She's talking about physical ones. She's also talking about spiritual ones. Like he has the power to bring down these rulers and these thrones. Praise be to Yah. So we got to petition him to do it, right? In accordance with his will. We don't need to be going down and trying to tear down everything of their kingdom in that sense. We ask him to go ahead and do it in that spiritual place where we can't do it. And Miriam stayed with her for about 3 months and returned to her home. And the time was filled for Elisheba to give birth, and she bore a son. And her neighbors and relatives heard how Yahuwah had shown great compassion on her, and they rejoiced with her. And it came to be on the 8th day that they came to circumcise the child. And they were calling him by the name of his father, Zechariah. And his mother answering said, not so, but he shall be called Yochanan. And they said to her, there is no one among your relatives who is called by this name. Then they motioned to his father what he would like to be called. And having asked for a writing tablet, he wrote, saying, Yochanan is his name. And they marveled. And at once his mouth was open and his tongue was loosed, and he was speaking and praising Elohim. And fear came on all those dwelling around them. And all these matters were spoken in all the hill country of Yehuda. And all who heard them kept them in their hearts, saying, what then shall this child be? And the hand of Yahuwah was with him. And Zechariah, his father, was filled with the set-apart spirit and prophesied, saying, blessed be Elohim of Yisrael. Blessed be Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael, for he did look upon and worked redemption for his people, and has raised up a horn of deliverance for us in the house of his servant David, as he spoke by the mouth of his set-apart prophets from of old, deliverance from our enemies, from the hand of all those hating us, to show compassion towards our fathers, and to remember his set-apart covenant, an oath which he swore to our fathers, to give us being delivered from the hands of our enemies, to serve him without fear, in set apartness and righteousness before him all the days of our life. And you, child, shall be called prophet of the Most High, for you shall go before the face of Yahuwah to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of deliverance to his people by the forgiveness of their sins, through the tender compassion of our Elohim, with which the daybreak from on high has looked upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. And the child grew and became strong in spirit, and was in the deserts until the day of showing himself openly to Yisrael. That's where I got there when I was thinking about the way of peace. It's like, where have I heard that before? Like, what a promise. What a beautiful promise that his son, he spoke these words over him, that he would be the one to give light to those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. Fathers have this unique calling on their life to speak over their children, to speak identity over them. We have an ability to impart to them their identity like no other person can ever have in their life. The truth is the reason the enemy seeks to destroy the bond between fathers and their sons, the reason he targets that more than anything else, is because fundamentally, when we sit down and we speak blessings over our children, we are literally forming in them their character. We're helping to impart upon them the things that will help them to develop into the person they were made to be, and vice versa. When we speak curses over them, we are speaking over them a core identity, a stumbling block that will follow them and can carry on with them. You guys today that are listening, how many of you have those seared in your soul moments from fathers? If you didn't have a father, the absence of that voice being spoken into you, right? This is why when you start to examine like people who are in horrific situations, whether they're trapped up and caught up in crimes, in drugs, and in the prison industrial complex of our society, the modern slave system that we have in our country, where we're like, oh no, we don't practice modern day slavery here. We just have a giant prison industrial complex that does indeed practice slavery and indentured servitude, right? Forms. I could get lost in that one. Something you should examine if you haven't examined. Some of you have gone down the rabbit hole of studying the military industrial complex, right? The medical industrial complex. If you haven't examined the prison industrial complex, spend some time doing it. You're commanded in the scriptures to not forsake and forget the prisoners, those who are in chains, right? There's a lot of them who are there by design of this kingdom of darkness. We just have a different way of persecuting people today. But the vast majority of those people that are in there, they come from homes where a father was absent, where they did not have a father. This is one of the strongest indicators that we can have on someone's life trajectory, like a predictive indicator that we can have about where they're likely to end up, is in a state of confusion, right? For girls, for young women, right? The failure of a father to speak identity over them, to speak blessings in life, and helping to reassure them in their who they are and who they're made to be, their role of their character throughout their life, right? This leads to a vast area of confusion, and it softens the soil for them to be manipulated by men in perverse and corrupt ways very effectively, right? This is so much of the art of that men have developed and cultured out there to try to get with women and to beguile them and to lead them astray, to be with them, comes from manipulating those areas, finding and seeking and exploiting those areas of their identity that did not get those affirmations that they should have had from their father. These are those, like we talked about that word for snares, right? These are the mines that the enemy has laid out in our culture and in our society to blow people's lives apart, to blow them apart. But when a father instead picks up the mantle of leadership in his home and he speaks identity of blessings into your children, like, think about how powerful it is. Fathers, like, if you're there, first of all, from the moment your child is born, your place should be at your wife's side. You're supposed to be her midwife with her. Okay, those of you that have never done that or have never even considered that you think that's a doctor's job, you think it's a medical disorder when your wife gets pregnant and it should be treated in a hospital. Listen, the greatest thing you can ever do is to co-labor with your wife as she goes to give birth. It's not that it's wrong that she has to go, some of you that have had to go into the medical system in order to have birth, but listen, you should be at her side. You should be the one helping her and along that process in a powerful way, because you have an opportunity when that child is first born to speak identity over it. Like the other side, the enemy, believe me, they spend a huge amount of time and resources devoting towards being there at the birth of the child, at the entry point of it when it comes out of the womb. They do all kinds of stuff at that exact moment because it's a critical moment of bonding and binding. And you have the opportunity to speak the life over it, to speak the name of Yahuwah and Yeshua, his son, to dedicate that child to Yahuwah. Like my children, my twins were born on the Feast of First Fruits, right? It was unbelievable. We didn't know we were going to have twins. And I literally, my wife was in labor for 3 days and 3 nights with Naomi. She labored for not as long with Jubilee. Jubilee came fast and quick, but with the twins was another 3 nights. And they literally ended up being born on the day of first fruits. And I'm like, these are literally the first fruits. These are like my offering to Yahuwah. My children are born on this day of this incredible blessing when you're supposed to bring barley, right? You're supposed to go out and you're supposed to harvest barley for the first time. It's the season. Barley is the first grain that comes out in the springtime. Wheat comes out later on. And you bring that first offering of your barley and you present it as a wave offering to Yahuwah, right? And you bake these loaves of barley bread. And it's like, man, it's a day of feasting. It's an awesome day, right? It's just such a joyous encounter. And I got to literally lift my children up and be like, these are the children you entrusted to me. These children are dedicated to you. Like they're not mine. Like Naomi and Jubilee, they're like, those are my children. But I'm like, yeah, but my twins are dedicated to him. My whole family are bondservants to Yahuwah. Like we have put ourselves in the position now where it's like, all we are yours. We entrust to you and petition you to take care of us, to provide for us, to sustain us, to protect us, to be our family to us, to nurture us, to satisfy us and sustain us, to lead us, to guide us, to direct us, to show my family our identity, our purpose, our mission. And you know what? I'm trying to raise my family to break generational cycles of idolatry, of abuse, of torture, and of foolishness. Like we're trying to change the trajectory of the Reynolds family so that we leave a path behind us that has been cleared to try to shine a light for those that are still caught in that darkness, because I know how great the darkness is. I know how great the darkness can become when people give themselves over to this. Like you read in Romans 1 here. Let's jump over to Romans. Let's go to Romans 1 here. Alrighty. Let's just jump in at verse 8. First, I truly thank my Elohim through Yeshua Messiah for you all, that your belief is spoken of in all the world. For Elohim is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the good news of his Son, how unceasingly I make mention of you, always asking in my prayers, if at all possible, I shall be blessed by the desire of Elohim to come to you, for I long to see you, so as to impart some spiritual gift to you, for you to be established. And that is to be encouraged together among you, each by the other's belief, both yours and mine. And I do not wish you to be unaware, brothers, that I have often purposed to come to you, but was hindered until now in order to have some fruit among you, as I also am among the other nations. I am a debtor both to the Greeks and to the foreigners, to the wise and to the foolish. That is why I am so eager to bring the good news also to you who are in Rome. For I am not ashamed of the good news of Messiah, for it is the power of Elohim for deliverance to everyone who believes, to the Yahudim first, and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of Elohim is revealed from belief to belief, as it has been written, but the righteous shall live by belief. Oh, come on. How many of you can testify to that? That you're not ashamed of the gospel. Like you're not ashamed of it. I have to I can't sit here and say that I've been bold and courageous about my beliefs and about like reading the word. Even if you go back to the more beginning phases of our channel, right? You can go back 7 years now. I think we've been putting videos out here. Like you can go back and see it. It's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. Those of you that have been along in this journey, like some of the first times some of you guys saw me was on Now You See TV and or with Through the Black with Tom Dunn and Jared Cressman, and some of the first interviews I gave with Zen Garcia. Like that was the first time for a lot of people that got exposed to us. But you can see, like over the course of time, there's been a change, and like a major distinction came for me in like my zealousness to read the word. Like a lot of times I used to kind of talk tangentially around it. You know what I mean? Like there's times and seasons when you're talking with people that you're using reason and logic, and you're not just saying in the book of Luke it says this, in the book of John it says that. You don't always talk like that to people. You might, but with some people you don't reason with them in that way, right? You try to use strategies and tactics to be able to be understandable to the people that you're communicating with. But the truth at the heart of the matter was I kind of used that as a cover to conceal the fact that I was nervous and embarrassed to read the Bible, just the Bible, lots of it. And like that change came in the Becoming Gibborim series. When I started doing that, my wife was like, "Why don't you just read the Bible, honey?" And I was like, "Good idea." Instead of just talking about stuff or about things that we find in the Bible, like just reading the Bible at length in large portions of it. And I was like, I think at the heart of the matter was I still had a fear of men. And I understand it's more popular to talk about other topics. Like I can grow in popularity on my channel much faster when I talk about a lot of the occult world stuff. It's true. Like my views go when I start talking a lot about that kind of side of the world, a lot about the kingdom of darkness, like the nitty gritty side of it, like the stuff that I've seen down inside the underworld. That stuff gets promoted a lot more. That stuff gets me a lot more invites for more interviews on other shows and stuff. Like they want to hear about that kind of stuff. And I understand, because there's a lack of understanding I understand they have not been given understanding about that topic. And so they're curious, and that's okay. However, I noticed that if I just read the scriptures a lot more people tune out, a lot more people unplug, they turn off, they change it away. And that's because we do have a heart in us that's led astray, that's easy to get it's easy to get distracted, and it's looking for something else to quickly gratify us. And you know what? It takes discipline to have a hunger for the word. It takes discipline to cultivate that desire and that appetite. But you know what? The more that I labor in this, the more I realize at the end of the day, it is a shame that I had that kept me from talking about it so boldly. It was a shame that I had. I was ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I was. There's years of my life where I never talked about it. There's years of my life where I kept a closet belief. And I was like, well, yeah, I'll just let my works show for it. I'll just let my works testify of what I believe. You know what? I'm going to tell you something. People need to know it. Like there's a reason we have a fear of men that's in us, because we've been raised by a society that tells us, like, don't talk about this stuff. Be politically correct. You're supposed to conform to the manners and the speech of the nations. You're not supposed to talk that way. It's not so we should coexist with each other. We should all get along here. And I'm like, yeah, it's hard truth and reality is there's an absolute truth, and then there's absolute lies. And I'm sorry, but you built your house on lies. You got to say that kind of stuff to people. You don't always have to say it like that, but sometimes people really need that. Like a rebuke to someone's face is better than somebody that's multiplying kisses out of their mouth, flattering lips. Like Yahoo is like, I'm going to cut off the flattering lips. Somebody will respect you so much more in their life if you were transparently honest with them, if you like were direct with them about reality. So people really need that in their life. Now listen, if you can't do that with love, you're just like a banging gong. You're like somebody smashing you're like a baby screaming in their ear. That's how you sound to them. So understand, if you can't bring these truths to people without love at the root of it, don't. Just wait. Wait till you've got a little more time of maturity, till you have some love as you can bring that message to people, because you got to be able to be balanced in the approach. Yeshua was so good at this. He could have crushed people with the truth, just crushed them with it. And he did sometimes, you bet. He's like, you brood of vipers, you sons of the serpent, you hypocrites, you whitewashed tombs. I love those verses. I'm like, yeah, preach, bro. Preach it, crush their heads. And then other times he's like lifting people up by their hand. He's just being so sweet and loving to them. And you're like, dang, you're so good. You're multifaceted and talented, and I appreciate you. Look at Yeshua, the author and the perfecter of our faith. Exemplify him. For the wrath of Elohim is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known of Elohim is manifest among them. For Elohim has manifested it to them. Did you hear that? They suppress the truth. Come on, who are those people? Let's jump into another book. Here's another book for you guys. I have an entire recommended reading list on my website, snatchedfromtheflames.com. You can just see all my recommended reads. This one's on there. I basically recommend all of Johnny Cerrucci's books, The Disciples of Ra, The Shocking Truth About Medicine, Viruses, and... So, in here, though, he has a page I'm going to reference from, which is just dealing with some of the influences that these things had. Hold on a second. Let's just jump in here. This is on page 296. We're going to talk about some of that suppressing of the truth. Because you got to understand, it's like, he's not saying that lightly. He's saying that back then, right? Suppressors of the truth is not a joke. People are serious about it. Going to talk about the Illuminati. People are like, oh, this is Nathan Rare. The Illuminati bloodlines. Listen, y'all. The Illuminati was founded by a devout Jesuit. Please understand something. He's like, practice canon law. Devout Catholic. Practice canon law. No. Bavaria. Check this out. Adam Weishaupt. Bavarian Illuminati. This is one of his books. And this is on page 296. And a more properly source of the author of... we'll just jump in here right here. Ready? It affords a curious glimpse into the methods used by the Illuminati in the advancements of its global mission to mark the words of Adam Weishaupt, quote, a literary society, end quote, said Weishaupt, is the most proper form of the introduction of our order into any state where we are yet strangers. Soon after Weishaupt's new Illuminati was created in 1776, he wrote to a friend about the secret plans of the order in these words. The great strength of our order, the Illuminati, lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always concealed by another name and another occupation. The formed of a learned or literary society or sorority or sororities is best suited to our purpose, and had Freemasonry not existed, this cover would have been employed. And it may be much more than a cover. It may be a powerful engine in our hands. By establishing reading societies, like book clubs, and taking these under our direction, we may turn the public mind which way we will. In like manner, we must try to obtain an influence in the military academies. This may be of a mighty consequence. A literary society is the most proper form for the introduction of our order into any state where Thai are yet strangers. This is later on, it goes on to quote, these orders or societies are part of the Ivy League of American universities and were formed as literary societies soon after 1776. The goal was to monopolize all institutions of higher learning and by these means subvert the minds of these people. This is the heart of where so much of the suppressing mechanisms of our society that seek to suppress the truth. Like, why is it in our universities and why is it in colleges and academics? There is such a sadistic suppression of the truth. That's because we really do have agents of evil, people that are bound by secret oaths, who have sown in, who's crept in sneakily unawares and have sown in insidious doctrines, have sown in things that would make people doubt the authenticity and the reality about who Jesus is, the Messiah, the Word, the truth of the Scriptures, the historicity of the Bible. They've sewn in all these different mechanisms to keep the truth from being heard, because functionally, that's the function of what a suppressor does. Like when you've got a firearm that's going to shoot a bullet out of it that's going at a high speed, right? There's a tiny explosion. When a primer, which is like the propellant, this is a silver bullet for fighting werewolves. The primer, which is on the back here, causes a tiny little explosion. Inside the casing, this brass casing normally, is a propellant. The gunpowder, right? As it burns, it creates a whole lot of hot gases. It's a tiny explosion that then pushes on the bullet itself down the barrel. And as that exits the barrel, right, there's that little fireball that happens outside of it. That's where all that noise comes from for a bullet. The second thing that causes noise is if the bullet is going faster than the speed of sound. Then the bullet itself, as it's flying, will make a crack in it, right? So if you use a bullet that is not going as fast, like a 45, doesn't exceed the sound barrier necessarily. And you suppress it, you make a metal tube that has baffles inside of it to help to contain those gases, those expanding gases as they go out, and help to trap some of those gases to muffle them. You can use literally thick rubber. Just going to put this out there for you guys. You can use thick baffles of rubber, like, those targets that you guys shoot with your firearms when you're doing your training, the bouncing targets move around, the really thick rubber. You can take that rubber, and that will help to build into a series of baffles in a tube that thread it onto the end of your firearm. You can make a suppressor that way. Obviously, people have been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. They're trying to suppress the sound of a report of a gunshot. They don't want it to be heard. It's the same mechanism that the enemies devise strategies to suppress and keep people from hearing the truth. Like, literally, think about the dumbing down of Zechariah. So, like, he couldn't hear anything afterwards. This is like literally the enemy comes in and puts blinders on people's eyes, and he deafens their ears so that they cannot see the truth, nor can they hear the truth. And this is fundamentally the war that we are in here. Let's carry on. For since the creation of the world, his invisible qualities have clearly been seen, being understood from what has been made, both his everlasting power and mightiness, for them to be without excuse. Because, although they knew Elohim, they did not esteem him as Elohim, nor gave thanks, but became vain in their reasoning. For since the creation of the world, his invisible qualities have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, both his everlasting power and mightiness, for them to be without excuse. Because although they knew Elohim, they did not esteem him as Elohim, nor gave thanks, but became vain in their reasonings, and their understanding heart was darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and changed the esteem of the incorruptible image, the incorruptible Elohim, into the likeness of an image of corruptible man and of birds and of four-footed beasts and of reptiles. Therefore Elohim gave them up to the uncleanness and the lusts of their hearts, to disrespect their bodies among themselves, who changed the truth of Elohim into the falsehood, and worshipped and served what was created rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. This is inherently the battle that we got to deal with, is people taking the corrupt images and worshiping him as if they are Elohim, right? Like, I talked to you guys about the Washington Monument, this giant obelisk, also called like a sun pillar, that stands there, this great phallus symbol, the constant middle finger to Yahuwah, right? That's there to collect these false rays of illumination. That's just standing there proudly and defiantly here in the United States, 555 feet tall, 111 feet down below the ground, 6,666 inches tall. It's just they'd love to shove their 666 all over the place, right? That thing, right? That thing, when it gets, like, there was an earthquake, there's a lot of people that went and prayed there back in 2011 and prophesied for Yahweh to break the curse over the land, to try to bring down the territorial power that was behind it, right? And a great earthquake took place and cracked that thing, broke a bunch of the stones. Like, it had to get shut down, closed down for a while, and try to repair it. As I was looking at these pictures of these people trying to repair this idol, it's like I'm reminded of Jeremiah in these times where he's like, you got your idols, you guys. If your house is on fire, does your idol run out of the house? You know, is it going to save itself? He's like, there's no breath in these things. There's no word of life in it. They can't even move and save themselves in a fire. And yet people will literally be carrying these idols out of those burning houses, but please understand something. There's idols that you have carried around in your life from the days of your youth. They just may not look the same as those people's idols, but you got them in your life. You still have them there, like on the top of almost every Baptist church in the entire country. I drive around. I'll be in the middle of stinking nowhere, like middle of nowhere Ozarks, middle of nowhere Appalachia. And I'm like driving back in these haulers, and I'm like, oh, look, a little Baptist church. Dang right, they got their sun pillar proudly on top. I'm like, you guys, you got to be kidding me. Come on. Come on. Like, if you couldn't root out the Freemasons and those like Jesuits that have just infiltrated your ranks, just get rid of the stinking obelisk on the top of your house. Like, you don't have to put these sun pillars up everywhere. Yahuwah hates this stuff. He hates it. Like, you got to root this stuff out every time you get a chance. Like, get rid of it. It's Romans 1, guys. It's fundamentals here. Sting and throw the Bible at a Baptist. They should be able to catch it and play ball all day long. But they got to get rid of them sun pillars too. You know what I'm saying? Come on, you guys. Who changed. All right, we're going to jump down. And likewise, because of this, Elohim gave them over to degrading passions. For even their women exchanged natural relations for what is against nature. And likewise, the men also, having left natural relations with women, burned in their lust for one another, men with men, committing indecency and receiving back the reward which was due for their straying. And even they did not think it worthwhile to possess the knowledge of Elohim. Elohim gave them over to a worthless mind to do what is improper. You see, that's the core tenet of it. People have been convinced to not think it worthwhile to possess the knowledge of Elohim. That's why they'll devote their time, their energy, their resources, their worship to other stuff. Because fundamentally, the heart of the issue is that people don't value it, that it's worthwhile to know the words of Elohim. They don't think it's valuable. Whereas this is the greatest treasure that you can ever have. Like, read Psalm 119 and understand that David is just proclaiming the wonderful treasures that he's found in the Torah of Yahuwah, in his statutes, in his testimonies, in his commandments. Like, he is just, dude's joked out of his mind. David dancing with all his might, cutting the heads off of Nephilim, just a champion, warrior, singing praises about the Torah. Like, dude's more pumped about what he found in there than anything ever that he did in his life. That's awesome, right? Like, if you can have that same zealous, passionate pursuits about the treasures that you found in the word, right? That's the stuff that conquers the nations, because the people will turn when we regard the scriptures. Like, it's literally, the people will be like, these people are incredibly wise. There's wisdom in here that the world is befuddled by. Oh, but when people don't, when they don't value it, listen to the fruit that comes. This is the fruit of the immortals, the ones that are rebels, the ones that don't value the knowledge of Elohim and instead turned themselves from it. Like, you think about these immortals that literally saw, they were in the presence of Elohim. Gabriel, a righteous one, a righteous immortal, is standing there when Zechariah is doubting him. And he's like, dude, I stand in the presence of Elohim. Are you even kidding me? Like, think about how much knowledge Gabriel has. Just think about the things he's witnessed from his creation till today. Just imagine, like, and he's never forgotten. Imagine if he never forgot anything. So just think of the quantity of information that has come across his eyes, let alone his ears and his hands. Like, the unbelievable depth of knowledge of Elohim that Gabriel possesses, right? And it says in the scriptures, the angels, the immortals, desired to look into the things that they lived through, that they experienced. The immortals wanted to study this stuff. They longed to learn about this stuff too. They longed to understand the complexities, the intricacies of Yahuwah's powerful story of redemption. They love to learn about this stuff. They desire that knowledge of Elohim still, even though they've seen him, like they've been in his presence. Some of these have literally been in the throne room with Yahuwah, heard a message that was devoted to one of the servants, his bondservants on the earth, and they come and bring that message to them. That's what Gabriel did here. Like, what an awesome, incredible warrior for the truth. But you have immortals of similar status and rank who have been in those same situations, known the supremacy, the authority, the awesome wonder working power of Yahuwah, the creator of the heavens and the earth. And yet they have not valued it. And so instead, they get given over to this darkening of their minds. This is the fruit that comes with the immortals who have rebelled and who have chosen to fall out of that state, like it talks about, those who've left their first estate. This is what happens to them. Having been filled with all unrighteousness, whoring, wickedness, greed, evil, filled with envy, murder, fighting, deceit, evil habits, whisperers, slanders, haters of Elohim, insolent, proud, boasters, devisers of evils, disobedient to parents, without discernment, covenant breakers, unloving, unforgiving, ruthless, who, though they know the righteousness of Elohim, that those who practice such deserve death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. Not just a brutal rebuke, but we can turn around and see this taking place every day of our life. Every day of our life. He carries on here in chapter 3, some of this other stuff we see. This is verse 10. As it has been written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is no one who is understanding. There is none who is seeking Elohim. They have all turned aside. They have together become worthless. There is none who does good, no, not one. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they have deceived. The poison of adders is in their lips, poison of dragons, whose mouth is filled with cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and wretchedness are in their ways, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of Elohim before their eyes. Fundamentally, this is how these agents of evil, these carriers of the seed of the serpent, are able to advance their agenda. They have no fear of Elohim. They have no knowledge of him. They don't value the knowledge of him. And you know what? Because of that, their mouths are filled with curses. Their mouths are filled with curses and with bloodshed. And you know what? This is such a juxtaposition to the things like the words, the last words my father spoke over me were curses. Curses on my marriage, curses on my relationship, curses on my mind, curses on my body. Like the last things he ever spoke to me out of his mouth were curses and threats. Like I can hear that being replayed today. I literally recorded it. It's like a recording and a phone log that I saved. I'm like, that's the last things he ever spoke to me. Those things are because he has been bound up in a generational curse where fathers and grandfathers have cursed their sons. They've set them up for ruin and destruction. And you know what? Every one of us has an opportunity to become a new man, to become a new creation, a new creature. Let's read about that person who out of our mouths come blessings and lives. Come on, jump on over to Ephesians 4 with me. I said we were going to get there right at the beginning. We're getting there now. Chapter 4. And I say, for as long as oh no, wrong one. A little short there. I call upon you, therefore, I, the prisoner of the Master, to walk worthily of the calling with which you are called, with all humility and meekness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, being eager to guard the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace, one body and one Spirit, as you also were called in one expectation of your calling, one Master, one belief, one immersion, one Elohim and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. But to each one of us, favor was given according to the measure of the gift of Messiah. That is why it says, he went up on high. He led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. What a giver. But what does he mean? He went up mean, except that he also first went down into the lower parts of the earth. He who went down is also the one who went up far above all the heavens to fill all. And he himself gave some as emissaries, some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as shepherds and teachers, for the perfecting of the set apart ones, to the work of the service, to a building up of the body of the Messiah, until we all come to the unity of the belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah, so that we should no longer be children, tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of men and cleverness, unto the craftiness of leading astray. See that? That's those characteristics of their kingdom. The craftiness of men leading people astray. Like you, it's easy today to turn on the news. It's easy today to turn on the representatives, a politician, and hear what it is they have to say and understand how so many people are disinherited the idea of politics as a force of help, of restoration, of deliverance for any of us, because we can watch them speak with their mouths before they're elected all kinds of promises. Then after the fact, they turn and follow the path of the wicked. It's like, well, people have been watching this for so many generations that they're just like, why bother? Why bother? You know, these people go on with the same agenda and they're carrying out these plans of absolute perversion, no matter who is in the place of these people. And so they start to learn that there's a craftiness behind the scenes. There really is a craft group behind these people that practice these secret oaths and these ceremonies and these rituals and these rites of these mystery religions, and they advance the agenda of the immortals day in and day out. And so these people that are beguiled by them, that are under the spiritual bindings to them through their oaths and their imprecations, they cannot break out of that because there is mutually assured destruction over them. There's blackmail. There's literally these compromisers have sincerely compromised to such a depraved level that they cannot be brought to the light. They won't come to the light and confess their sins because what they've done has been done in darkness. They don't want to come to the light. But you know what? We are supposed to be a juxtaforce. We're supposed to be a absolute ferocious force against that we would set an example to turn this world inside out. But we, maintaining the truth in love, we grow up in all respects into him who is the head, Messiah, for from whom the entire body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the working by which each part does its share, causes growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. So I say this in witness in the Master, that you should no longer walk as the nations walk, in the futility of their mind, having been darkened in their understanding, having been estranged from the life of Elohim, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart, who having become callous, have given themselves up to indecency, to work all uncleanness with greediness. But you have not learned so, Messiah. But you have not so learned Messiah. If indeed you have heard him and were taught by him as truth is in Yeshua, that you put off, with regard to your former behavior, the old man, being corrupted according to the desires of the deceit, and to be renewed in the spirit of your mind, so that you put on the renewed man, which was created according to Elohim in righteousness and set apartness of the truth. Therefore, having put off the false, speak truth, each one with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be wroth, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your rage, nor give place to the devil. It's literally like, don't give rent to the devil. Don't give the devil territory to occupy. This is those legal grounds that we give him, right? We gotta work to resist any area that's giving him legal grounds into our life. Let him who steals steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, so that he has somewhat to share with those in need. Let no corrupt word come out of your mouth, but only such as is good, for the use of building up, so as to impart what is pleasant to the hearers. That's a verse of all verses to memorize. One of the best verses I ever memorized in my life. I didn't memorize it in this version, but it's, let no corrupt word come out of your mouth, but only such as is good for the use of building up, so as to impart what is pleasant to the hearers. And do not grieve the set apart spirit of Elohim, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and displeasure and uproar and slander be put away from you, along with all evil, and be kind towards one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as Elohim also forgave you. And become then imitators of Elohim as beloved children, and walk in love as Messiah also has loved us, and gave himself as a gift and an offering to Elohim for a sweet-smelling fragrance. But whoring and uncleanness or greed of gain, let it not even be named among you, as is proper among the set-apart ones. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse joking, which are not fitting, but rather thanksgiving. For this you know, that no one who whores, nor unclean one, nor one greedy of gain, who is an idolater, has any inheritance in the reign of Messiah. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these, the wrath of Elohim comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not become partakers with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Master. So walk as children of the light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving what is well pleasing to the Master. And have no fellowship with the fruitless works of darkness, but rather convict them, expose or reprove them. For it is a shame even to speak of what is done by them in secret. but all matters being convicted are manifested by the light. For whatever is manifested is light. That is why he says, wake up, you who sleep, and arise from the dead, and Messiah shall shine on you. See then that you walk exactly, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are wicked. So then do not be foolish, but understand what the desire of Yahweh is. Do not be drunk with wine, in which there is loose behavior, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to each other in psalms and songs of praise and spiritual songs, singing and striking the strings in your heart to the Master, giving thanks always for all to Elohim the Father, in the name of our Master Yeshua the Messiah. Come on now. Preach on, bro. Get your preach on. It's so good. You got to get fired up for the word. You know, it's like I got my daily dose of goodness in. You know what I'm saying? I'm fired up. I'm excited. I hope you guys are too. I hope that those words edify you and encourage you and exhort you and challenge you, convict you, and they just want to build you up, you guys, because I love you. I sincerely care about you guys. I know you're real people on the other side of this who are listening to this right now with real life, real struggles, real trials and persecutions that are afflicting you and affecting you. But you know what? This is the time that we are alive. This is the day Yahweh has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Like, we have an opportunity this day to choose who it is we'll serve, whether the gods, the immortals of the nations, or the Yahweh Elohim, and Him only. Like, we have an opportunity to set ourselves apart, to be not like the others that are out there, to be different. You that are young men, you young women, you young children that are watching this, you have an opportunity to make a decision today to pursue His ways, to live the way He told you to have a hunger and a thirst for His word above all else. Like, I challenge you, have a scriptures, like have a word that's yours, make it yours. Like, write in it, color in it, highlight it, take a crayon over the passages that you really like, go over it time and time again, because you know what? You're building a foundation. That is literally your opportunity for you to sit there and sharpen your tool, right? I'm going to go outside and I'm going to sharpen my knives because I've been using them. And as I use them over time, they get duller. They get duller to where they're not as sharp as they should be. They're not popping the hairs off of my hand like they should be right now. They're still shaving it, but it's not popping and exploding itself away, which means I need to go back and I need to hone this edge. And you know what? By you diligently taking that time right now at your age where your mind is so full and it's so ready to be filled up. You don't have to pick up all of those cups that the world's trying to offer you to drink. You have an opportunity to fill your mind with the words of your Creator. He loves you. He's got a powerful story. He's got prophecies of words to speak to you that were written about long ago, about who you are, who you were made to be, that you were made to be a mighty warrior, that you were made to be an unbelievable child of the King of Kings. You were made to fight against the wicked, to wage a war against the spiritual powers that are working day and night to destroy the things that are valuable and precious in your life. You were made to intercede, to pray for those that are around you, for your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, your friends, your community, the nation, the world, that you were made to go set captives free, to go wrestle the giants that are taking over the society around you. You were made for that. Don't forsake the calling that has been put upon you from the days of your youth. Don't squander it. You have an opportunity now to be a living example to the peer group that is around you, to the other people that are around you. You can throw off these worthless things that they are caught up in, and you can show them a better way. You can show them the path of righteousness is exciting, is wonderful, and they should follow it too. I love you all. I thank you all for coming on this incredibly perilous journey with me. I appreciate you all for your steadfast prayers, your incredible support, your generosity, and your kindness. I love you guys so much. May you live dangerously out there every single day of your life, because though the days may be evil, redeem that time so that you could be ferocious warriors for the kingdom of Yahuwah, the mighty remnant army that's rising up. I love you all. Talk to you soon.